Hey there, welcome to a new video. So today we are talking about the importance of environment, how environment truly affects the way it is that we live our lives. My name is Halana Black. I've been a traveling writer since 2018. I've been privileged enough to live in 10 countries in the past 7 years. Currently live in Playa del Carmen, Mexico. And I am trading in my current beach living location to go move to the desert to San Miguel de Allende in central Mexico to create the creative studio of my dreams where I can write, paint, cook, record videos, do all the things that I've always wanted to do, while I still have an opportunity to be able to travel around the world to learn various life lessons that I want to be able to experience. Um, and so if you watch yesterday's video, yesterday I talked all about discipline, the 7 best ways to be able to develop discipline and how it will help you as a writer in 2026. Um, And discipline is important. However, it's not the full story of how it is that I believe that people are able to, um, that women in particular are able to build their most creative lives. Um, Many people, many women in particular, are trying to do meaningful work in environments that don't really support who they are. And I don't think that we really are allowed to sit down and really think about what type of an environment do we really need to be, what type of an environment do we need to create within ourselves, and an environment that we create outside of ourselves, um, that will be conducive to the woman that we want to become. And I want to especially ask Black women to consider this because I don't think that this isn't something that we get told much in our much younger years, about whether or not the environment that you live in is conducive to who it is that you would like to become. We don't get asked the question to be able to consider, um, do you like being here? It's just sort of you plopped somewhere, wherever it is that you happen to come from. And you may move to some place, for a job opportunity or for schooling or for something like that. But you never really get an opportunity to sit down and really think about, do you like where you are? And is it conducive to who it is that you want to become? So I said that earlier in my intro that I've lived abroad since 2018. I need to be able to figure out how to be able to say this in these videos because I've done a lot. I've done some more traveling outside of the traveling that I've done since 2018. Since 2018, I've lived abroad consecutively into over consecutive years, over 7+ consecutive years. However, I'm 48 now. I did the Peace Corps when I was in my early 20s, about a year after I graduated from college. And I went to Togo in West Africa. And for some years after that, I had done short stints, meaning weeks and months at a time, in various West African countries, um, like Ghana, Burkina Faso, um, Mali, and have done projects in for other countries as well. So, I would say that and then of course I've done traveling for fun to other places too. Um, so I can pretty safely say that I'm a pretty well-traveled person. Although I know many people who are like on their 80th, 90th, 100th plus country. Um, perhaps I'll get there one day. I'm not really sure if wanting to visit all of the countries in the world is really my goal. Um, but anyway, what living abroad has taught me, um, that environment shapes a lot of things about us, and it shapes our nervous system. It shapes our creativity. It shapes our ability to focus, and it shapes our identity. So different places ask different things of you. You get to exercise these different parts of your identity when you live in different environments. And so, for example, when I lived in Southeast Asia, which is a very soft place to be, right? Soft place to be. People, generally speaking, I'm being super general here. People tend to be very can be reserved, more on the quiet side. For the most part, people were Buddhists, and so that has a culture unto its own. Um, as opposed to when I lived in, let's say, Rwanda. When I moved to Rwanda, I lived there for about 3 years during the pandemic. People also tended to be reserved, and more on the quiet side, but just the environment of living in a country that is rebuilding itself asked a lot of me, um, because a lot of the systems in it, a lot of systems that while Rwanda is a very well run country, I was very surprised. It's not like any of the countries that I had visited living in West Africa at all. Um, there's still an element of, well, coming to an African country, it's often things are rebuilding, and there's just things that you need to be patient with. Um, and so those brought very different energies. And so I got an opportunity to be able to exercise these parts of me, and I get to be able to decide, is this an energy that I can live with for the rest of my life? Because what I've been doing for the last 7 years is just sort of deciding that I wanted to go to different countries and to see what sorts of environments fit who I am and who it is that I would like to become. And so I would come to a place, would live there for several weeks to months, and in the case of Rwanda, several years, more so because of the pandemic. Had there been no pandemic, I don't think I would have stayed in Rwanda so long. I probably would have gone to Kenya or someplace else. Um, however, I wouldn't have stayed in Rwanda itself that long. Um, so being able to have that opportunity to be able to live in different places, I got to be able to see, um, do I like myself in these environments? Do I like my temperament in these environments? Um, does this environment bring out the best in me? Um, those sorts of questions that I don't think I ever really considered living back at home in the United States. Now, in the United States, I've lived in various places. I was born and raised in New Jersey. Um, had gone to university. I completed university at Rutgers University. And then after I completed Rutgers, I worked for a year in New York City. A lot of my life I had lived between, not that I lived in New Jersey, but I also had because I lived so close to New York City, I went to New York City a lot to be able to participate in arts, all of the arts things that go on in New York City. So I grew up with that element in my life, going to, shows and plays, and whether it was a street performance, or even sometimes there was an opportunity to be able to do things, to go to, Broadway and go to really nice restaurants, or like, little hole in the wall ethnic restaurants that were really cool. Um, to be able to go to, film festivals and all sorts of things. I had access to all those things growing up, and I consider that to be a blessing. Um, but it also brought out It's just a harshness about New York and New Jersey, that particular area that I grew up in. There's a certain harshness about it that I don't think that suited me. After I came back from the Peace Corps, I went to the Peace Corps, went to Togo for 2 years, and that was a totally different environment. I lived in an environment that was it was super rural, about as rural could ever get. Very small village, a few hundred people who lived there in a place where I spoke none of the language. The in Togo, the national language is French. However, everyone has their own language. African people, everyone has their own language. And so the people that I lived with, they are the Kotokoli people. And so their language is also called Kotokoli or Tem. If I remember correctly, is what it's also called. Um, and so that environment was a different place for me to learn. Um, again, life can be very difficult, very harsh. What it's like to live in a place that they were Muslim people, and so that was my first experience in living with Muslim people. Togo, for the most part, tended to be a very poor country. Um, it's a country that at the time when I was there was considered to be under a dictatorship, and so that had its own that in learning what it means to live under a dictatorship with other people who are living in poverty, that was an education in and of itself. But I also got an opportunity to learn a lot of things from the people there. And from the people there, learned what it's like to be a farmer. I learned a lot about traditional African foods, how to be able to cook in traditional ways, um, to be able to cook certain traditional West African meals that, to this day, it just they taste and feel like home to me now, which I never thought that I would say. I always have a taste for some sort of a West African soup. And not that everybody in West Africa eats all of the same things, but the dishes do tend to be similar, highly spiced, thick soups, and traditional starches like different types of, uh, rice and yams and um, plantains and all sorts of things, right? So I look for ways to be able to mix that with the things that I have learned to cook from my own culture as an African American who grew up in America. So, there's that environment. I lived for a few years also in Florida and Massachusetts. So all of these things sort of add to who it is that I am. Um, and so when I moved, just to be able to fast forward to present day, when I moved, I've lived in um, different countries all around the world, Southeast Asia. I moved to Rwanda. From Rwanda, I lived in the UAE, very short stint, maybe about a month altogether. Um, oh, I went to Turkey for 3 months, and then I came here to Mexico. So I've been through to few different cities here in Mexico, and because of the economy, I wound up sitting in Playa del Carmen, um, simply because of the deal that I got on the apartment that I had. My apartment is very reasonably priced for where it is that I live. The beach is like literally down the street, and I live pretty much in the center of town. Um, and if I'm going to be paying this low rent next to the beach, I figured it would be a cool place for me to be able to live for a while. And I enjoy it. It's just that I have this vision of this creative place where I would like to be able to live, to be able to live my life, right? And so Playa del Carmen, beautiful city, even more gorgeous beach, but it's also quite, it's a city town, or it can be, depending on where you live. I guess if I live like more further out on the outskirts of town, it would be less party. Um, but it's just not my thing. I don't really need to be at the beach like this all of the time. Now, when I lived in Vietnam, I lived in Vietnam for almost a year. I lived in Vietnam for almost a year in a beach town that's actually growing by leaps and bounds now. It's called Da Nang. And I went back and forth between Da Nang and Hoi An, those two beach towns. Beautiful, beautiful places. While I was there, I also quite literally would just roll out of the bed and you can go, barefoot a couple of blocks down the street to get to the beach if you wanted to. That's how close to the beach, even closer to the beach over there than I am now, which is about a 10 to 15-minute walk. Um, and so while I was in Vietnam, I could wake up in the morning and they would put like meditation music over the loudspeaker on the beach. And so it was really nice. And you would see people from all over the community, Vietnamese people coming out um, for their part. It's just part of their morning ritual. They would come to the beach. They would do their calisthenics. They would do their yoga. They would bring their incense to do what they do to be able to honor ancestors. Um, It was just really beautiful to watch. Yeah, and to be able to witness, older people, senior citizens, to be able to go out into the sand and to do a full, forward facing split, forward face, head this way, legs out to both sides, straight. And would just sit there in meditation, eyes closed on the beach for a good hour, maybe even more sometimes. And to be able to see older people in this level of fitness was just amazing. Or even just, older people if they weren't out, if they weren't out sitting in meditation or doing splits like that, they were just out and active. They were out and walking, they were eating fresh foods, doing all sorts of things that were health forward. Da Nang to me was a very health forward place. And while health forward living lives here, also in Playa del Carmen, it just feels like a gimmick here. It's like, people just sort of come in and they go and they come. Um, and sometimes I feel like people come through here looking to take advantage of people. Like, they put on this spiritual outfit, spiritual suit, if you will. And they want to offer stuff like yoga or sound bowl meditation sessions or mushroom sessions. And this isn't everybody, of course, but sometimes I just feel like a lot of this stuff that people offer, it's like they got their certificate on Monday and on Tuesday they're outside asking people for paid sessions to be able to do your thing. I'm not mad at people for wanting to make a living out of being a spiritual person. Um, but I don't know. I need a little more depth to where it is that I would really love to live. I need a little bit more culture. I need a bit more involvement of elders. I need a bit more history. And that's not to say that doesn't exist here. It's just that it's like this beach culture has just sort of been like it came from something, like it's a touristy thing that just sort of came here and showed up, and it's like it's a gathering of tourists. It's not from local people. It's not of the local culture. Um, and I'm quite sure people who are local to here are just sort of looking at all of us like, who the hell are these people? So, um, so I want to be able to leave the beach and leave, just sort of leave at least this beach. I haven't been to many other beaches in Mexico. But beaches in Mexico just, they just tend to be tourist destinations, which is fine. I'm not mad at a tourist destination. It's just not where I want to be able to live. And so I want to be able to trade that in for the desert. Um, the desert. So I don't have a lot of experience living in the desert, but it's always been something that I've wanted to do. And in particular, I want to go to San Miguel de Allende. The daytime is usually quite temperate, very nice outside, and in the evenings, it tends to be a little bit cooler. Um, Quite similar to the weather that I experienced living in Kigali, Rwanda. Daytime was usually, for the most part, was really quite nice. Excuse me. And then at night, it's quite cool. So much so to the point that most people don't really even have a need for air conditioning. I know everyone thinks that Africa is just so hot all over. It's not. Um, it can get quite cool in certain parts of the year. And so San Miguel de Allende is quite similar. So let's just talk about the weather. I love that. The beach here in Playa del Carmen is like 6 months out of the year. It's like, at least for me, it's completely unlivable. It is hotter than hell. You can't go outside. It's either you go outside early, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning to go do the things that you need to go do. By 8ish in the morning, forget it. It's a wrap. And then it's not even like, you can go places that are air conditioned because I need air conditioning. It's not even like you can go inside in places that are air conditioned because a lot of places here just don't have air conditioning. That you just gotta sit in the heat. And I just don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. Um, for me, it's a very short stint of time to be able to enjoy the beach. So the beach, for me, in the way that I like it, gets really nice from like March, April, May-ish. And around May, June is when it starts to get hotter than hell. Um, and so I really just want to leave the beach as a vacation. Like, like when Mexico is so big that there are so many beautiful places to go and visit. And so I think I just want to leave the beach as um, a vacation destination. When I'm tired of being in San Miguel de Allende, I can go elsewhere. I can go someplace else and enjoy it. And I might come back to Playa del Carmen, even though, I feel like I've been here enough that I could probably stand to go and visit a few other beaches that are here, and there are many in Mexico. Um, and so I feel like San Miguel de Allende would be a lot more um, conducive to the creative life that I want to be able to live for several reasons. Number one, it's access to art. San Miguel de Allende is well known for um, its it's well known for its art, its connection to art creation. There's a famous school that's down there that does a lot of art. Um, the last time I looked, the prices were kind of ridiculous. Um, However, there are local people that offer their own classes and their own spaces. And that's really how I want to be able to connect to local people. Every time I go to a new country, I like to be able to figure out what is my way of being able to connect to the people who live there. What is it that I have to be able to learn from the local people? And so I believe that San Miguel de Allende has enough of space for me to be able to get involved in its art creation community, to sit with other Mexican people, young people, old people, who can teach me art in the way that I want to be able to do it. Now, I got into art when during the pandemic, at the very early days of the pandemic, when I was in Vietnam, right? We were about to do our first when everything was shutting down and we couldn't go outside. We what we did was we went and we did a whole different I went to the mall and I just bought a bunch of art supplies. All the art supplies that I bought wound up being all the wrong stuff. However, um, I figured it out over time and I learned how to be able to do what I think are nice pieces of art. I did watercolor a little bit with different types of paints. I did soft pastels, and I kept all of those things. And over a number of years, I used YouTube as, that was, my free little YouTube university. I used that as my school to be able to expand my knowledge of art. And so Mexico has such a long and beautiful history of art and culture. I feel like this is a really great place for me to be able to actually take some real lessons with real people who create art on a regular basis. And that to me is a great life. That is fun. Also, I'm a writer. Um, I'm a writer, and so I get to I get to, write magazine articles. I just completed published a couple of articles, one in Parents Magazine, and another one for Business Insider, and I'm working on a few others. Um, and so I get to be able to sit and write about a lot of the things I write about are centered in the life that I've created for myself over the last 7 years as a traveling writer. And that excites me. And so I get to be able to have this really cool creative life that I want to be able to have in San Miguel de Allende. Um, to be able to sit down and think about what it is that I've experienced in the last few years and how I want to tell the story about what it is that I have experienced from the position of being a Black woman who travels the world, who's originally from the United States. Um, I have a whole health story, a health and becoming story that I would like to be able to share in books and things like that. But I'm doing the smaller work at this moment with doing the magazine articles. I use the magazine articles as a way to be able to see how telling stories actually resonates with people outside of people that I know who read my Substack articles or people who just sort of know me and just from speaking to me here have heard my story. I get to be able to share what it is that I write with a public that is larger than what I directly have access to. That's what I'm trying to say. Um, I'm also a cook. I'm a great home cook. Um, what I would really love to be able to do is I would love to be able to write a cookbook, maybe even a series of cookbooks, about the things that I've learned about food and culture over the last few years and how it intertwines with my culture of African American culture. Um, and being able to use food as a way to be able to heal yourself, right? And so I think Mexico is a great place for me to be able to do that. And so I want to I just see, this beautiful kitchen where I can create these great videos from for people, showing you how to be able to create some of the dishes that I like to be able to make. Um, and maybe even have like space for gardening and things like that. And then even if I don't, in the first place that I go to, I don't necessarily think I want to have garden space. But definitely time and space to be able to go to things like local markets, to be able to show people what that looks, what does a local market in Mexico look like? What does the shopping experience look like? The different types of stores that you can go to. There's the artisanal sort of I call bougie food stores where you can get, handmade artisan foods, some of the more expensive, maybe more imported stuff. But then there's also, smaller local markets of people who sell um, things that are purposely organic. And then there are other more general markets that are available to the public that sell all sorts of foods, um, fresh foods, prepared foods, foods that are steeped in local culture. And don't cost a friggin' arm and a leg that they do here in Playa del Carmen. Oh, that's a whole different story. Um, and to be able to be connected to local culture. Um, excuse me, to be able to experience things like the Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos, I think it's called in Spanish. Dia de los Muertos. I look forward to being able to be connected to a traditional celebration of that. I've seen people celebrate it here, but it looks like it's more of like a super local family sort of a celebration. There's no larger community celebration, at least not in this area of Playa that I live in. Maybe I'm missing something. If I am, please do tell me in the comments. Um, But it seems it's a very individual, family celebration for people here in Playa del Carmen, whereas in San Miguel de Allende and other surrounding towns, it's very much a shared community celebration. And I can't wait to experience that. Um, and in other places, like art and culture is very much rooted and embedded in the culture in very different ways. There's a few towns, there's another town called Guanajuato, which is about an hour away, less than an hour away from San Miguel de Allende. And I actually went to Guanajuato for a few weeks, maybe back in 2017, I want to say 16 or 17. I went to Mexico for 30 days just to be able to sort of test the life that I have now, to be able to test my ability to be a digital nomad. And I, just wanted to be able to test the waters for a second. And I had a great time. And so I decided I wanted to come back out. Now, one of the things that I experienced when I was in Guanajuato, because I didn't go to San Miguel de Allende, I didn't have time to be able to, pack up and go to another city. What I did was I was there during one of their other big art festivals that I think lasts a good month. I had no idea that this festival was going on at the time. I just happened to show up at the right time. No lie. It just happened to work out. And it was absolutely fascinating. You would go outside at night at like 10 o'clock at night, and everybody would be outside. And um, I forget what they call them, but the guys who dress in these outfits, and they're it's like a play, and they bring people along in the city, and they tell a story walking through the town. And there's a big theater that's absolutely gorgeous there. And there were people out on the streets, and they were drawing these beautiful drawings on the sidewalks, that I would just sit and watch, and I would take pictures as they would progress with these pictures, and they had so much depth to them. I mean, just gorgeous pictures. There's a university there, and some of the students there were art students. So a lot of the students that you would see out and about doing a lot of the painting on the ground, they were university students. And I had actually run into a woman, um, I think she was Mexican if I remember correctly, but she was house sitting. And somehow we had met up in the streets somewhere in a cafe, and we got to talking to each other. She invited me back to her place. I said, okay, cool. With the place where she was house sitting. And so I went to the house that she was house sitting in, and I remember it was on the outskirts of town, and so on the outskirts of Guanajuato in town, you can actually look down on the whole city. So you just get this view, this vista of a town of all the colorful little houses in the valley on the bottom. And just like mountain and sky. It was just from the kitchen. Now back then I didn't know well, back then I had a love for cooking, but it just didn't really click that that would be a big part of my life as of yet. I just knew that I really liked it. And so being in that kitchen at that time and looking out at that view, I was just like, wow, it um, had this long, wide window, like these curtains. They had some sort of a Mexican design on it, and then it had Mexican tiles on the wall, that were these different bright colors. And then the people who owned the home, it was a couple they were a Mexican couple who were traveling. They had gone to Europe for some weeks. And one of them was a painter, and then the other one was a jewelry designer. And so, of course, the house was filled with stuff that they had created. And they actually used their home as a studio, as a creative studio for the both of them. So there would be certain places in the house that were set up for sale. And so, like a museum. And so, one room might have, a bunch of different paintings with prices and things on it. And she would, show me around that. And then for the person who was a jewelry designer, they had different showcases throughout the house, just different glass showcases. And it was mostly silver jewelry that they were working on because there's a lot of silver here in Mexico. And they made the most beautiful, big, chunky bracelets and um, rings and earrings and all sorts of, traditional designs and, other designs that were a little more out there. And I just loved it because, I love jewelry, right? I love handmade stuff. I appreciate handmade jewelry. Um, and so this was just fascinating. And a part of me said, when I walked into this house, I said, I could live like this. Like I can do this. I could live like this is an environment that would be conducive to the person that I was becoming. However, I was too scared to be able to claim it. I wasn't ready to say, okay, this is it. This is me. I'm about to do this. I had to go through a few things. Had to go through a few things before I actually learned how to claim it. Well, years later, 7, 8, maybe even 10 years later, here I am. I'm ready to be able to claim that life that I want, right? I want that art life where I can combine my art, my writing, my cooking, and my storytelling ability to be able to put all of that together in one place. I envision a place, a house where I can put all of those things together. So the house will be sort of set up, of course, for my comfort, my living, but it's also set up for the purpose of um, capturing moments in pictures, in video. Um, Maybe there'll be a space for other creators to come in and do stuff that they want to be able to create. Um, yeah, and it's just going to be like annoyingly Mexican. I love Mexican. I love the Mexican aesthetic. People often ask me if this scarf that I have on is Mexican. It's actually not. I actually bought this, and this is a silk scarf that I bought in Vietnam. I want to say in Hanoi, at one of the silk markets there. But just very bright. ruffles. Sometimes you get a bunch of, bright colors. Sometimes it'll be a lot of blacks, a lot of whites mixed in with a lot of bright colors. And I love it. I absolutely love the Mexican aesthetic. I love being in the desert. I love the Spanish colonial design homes. I love being in a place where, you can see cactus with beautiful flowers and, hillsides um, with trees and the different beautiful homes and like that's the aesthetic that I'm looking for that I want to be able to live in. That's the life that I want to be able to have. Not that there's anything wrong with beach. It's just not, it's just I personally just don't see that for the life that I really would like to be able to have for myself. I just want a place that has a little bit more depth to it than what I can actually access here in the culture within Playa del Carmen. And so I want to invite you to think about how the design of your environment, how the design of your environment is actually affecting your ability to be the person that you want to be. That's a question that I think you could probably sit with and journal for a while. Um, it's a really about designing conditions for your best work. It's not necessarily always about discipline. Um, but when the discipline by itself stops working, you need something else to that will push you forward, so that you feel supported. That's I can't tell you how important that is, especially as a person because I'm a single person and I live alone. And I don't have, other close family. I expect that I will have other close ties once I move, both Mexican people as well as other people who are travelers and also call San Miguel de Allende their home. There's a lot of people who've been come from other countries and have been living there for 10, 20, 30 years plus. And I want to be able to have connections to all of those people. And so this video is really for women um, who you've done the things, you've lived, you've worked, you've handled all the responsibility, and now you're interested in just creating something that has a little bit more depth than what you've been experiencing. And so I want you to know that it's not too late to get that. You're not being overly indulgent. What you're really doing for yourself right now is you are responding to the thing, you are calling what is next in your life and you're being intentional about it. And that's a good thing. And I share this because we really just need more examples of women, Black women in particular, who are intentional about their lives and can do it without an apology. Um, this is really about claiming authorship over your life. You haven't missed that boat if you've been feeling that. You haven't missed the boat. The boat is still out there. If you just gotta decide that you want to get on it. Just get on it and just start making some decisions. And so for you, that might include moving abroad. It might include moving abroad. Um, or it may be something totally different. And there's also stages to this. Like I've done this through, like I didn't just up and leave one day. Um, if you listen to the disciplines video, which probably would be the video that'll be suggested after this one, um, you'll be able to see. I share another story about how I used to go to the airport when I had no money to actually buy a plane ticket, but I would hang out at the airport and do my work as a freelance writer there. Um, so yeah, but for my ladies who wanted to write, if being a writer is a part of the environment that you want to be able to create for yourself, I don't care whether you're a writer, but you want to be able to learn how to do something else with your writing, or you've always wanted to be a writer, um, but haven't really figured out how to do it. Or even for my ladies who like you have a business, you're doing a thing, you just want to be able to share what it is that you're doing in writing with people, particularly in magazines. On February 22nd, 2026, I am starting an 8-week live group course called Pitching Magazines with Confidence. It's a small group of ladies who are getting together for 8 weeks to be able to learn the art of pitching magazines. I give you my whole process for being able to get yourself published in magazines like Essence. I've been published in parents.com, Business Insider. Where else? Did I say Essence already? AARP, the magazine, the actual printed magazine. And also, I've written a few things for things like Sisters from AARP, um, which is a very popular online magazine or online newsletter for women of African American descent, where I talk a lot about some of my food choices and my food journey and my health and healing journey. And I connect it to my travel life. So if you want to be able to learn more about that, you can go to the link in the description box. If you just want to stay connected, you can also see my 5 successful magazine pitches. I share a few of the pitches that I have made to these big, larger publications. And I also leave you a link to the published version of that particular pitch. So you get to be able to see for yourself what that looks like. So again, my name's Helana Black. I'm so happy that you are here. Come back again tomorrow. I'll be doing another video. Have a great day.